Jake Morrison walked slowly through the thick forest of Douglas fir trees. His boots made soft sounds on the wet ground covered with fallen leaves. The morning air was cold and fresh in his lungs. He had been a forest ranger for 6 years now and loved every day of it. The Pacific Northwest was his home, and he could not imagine working anywhere else. He carried his usual gear on his belt, a radio to call for help if needed, a first aid kit for injured hikers, a camera to document anything unusual. His notebook was in his back pocket where he wrote down everything he saw during his daily patrols. Today felt different somehow. The forest was too quiet. Usually he could hear birds singing in the trees and small animals moving through the bushes. But today there was almost no sound at all. Even the wind seemed to have stopped blowing. Jake checked his watch. It was 8:30 in the morning. He had been walking for 2 hours already and had covered about 5 miles of his assigned area. He needed to check the old mining trail that ran along Cascade Creek. Hikers sometimes got lost on that trail because it was not well marked. As he walked toward the creek, he noticed something strange. The trees looked burned in one small area. The bark was black and some branches had fallen to the ground. But there had been no forest fires in this area for over 10 years. Jake took out his camera and started taking pictures. He walked closer to examine the burned trees. The damage was in a perfect circle about 20 feet wide. In the center of the circle was a shallow hole in the ground. It looked like something had crashed here from above. Jake knelt down beside the hole and looked carefully. There were no pieces of metal or plastic that would suggest an airplane or helicopter had crashed. No smell of fuel or oil, just burned earth and a few strange marks that looked almost like claw scratches. He was writing notes about the scene when he heard a very soft sound. It was like a kitten mewing, but somehow different. The sound came from a pile of fallen branches near the edge of the burned area. Jake moved the branches carefully with his hands. Under the largest branch, he found something that made his heart race. It was a small creature about the size of a house cat. But it was not a cat or any animal he had ever seen before. The creature had scales that changed color in the sunlight. They looked green and gold and blue all at the same time. Its body was long like a lizard, but it had 4 legs and 2 small wings folded against its back. Its head was shaped like a snake, but with large, amber-colored eyes that seemed to look right into his soul. Jake had studied biology in college before becoming a ranger. He knew every animal that lived in these forests. This creature was not in any textbook he had ever read. It was not like anything that should exist on Earth. The small creature was breathing, but very weakly. One of its wings looked broken, and there was a cut on its side that was still bleeding. Jake could see that it was in great pain, but trying to stay quiet and still. He should call his supervisor right away. He should report this discovery to the wildlife department. There were rules about finding unknown species, but something stopped him from reaching for his radio. The creature's eyes met his, and Jake felt something he had never felt before. It was like the animal was trying to talk to him without making any sound. He could almost hear words in his mind, telling him not to be afraid. Jake looked around to make sure he was alone. No other hikers were nearby. No sounds of people coming through the forest. He made a decision that would change his life forever. He took off his jacket and wrapped it carefully around the injured creature. It did not try to bite him or scratch him. Instead, it seemed to understand that he was trying to help. Its breathing became a little stronger, and its eyes stayed focused on his face. Jake picked up the wrapped creature and held it close to his chest. It weighed almost nothing. He could feel its small heart beating very fast against his hands. He knew he had to get it somewhere safe where he could help it recover. His cabin was 3 miles away through the forest. It was his home during the week when he was working. On weekends, he went to the city to visit friends and buy supplies. But right now, his cabin was the only place where he could help this strange and wonderful creature without anyone else knowing about it. The walk back to his cabin seemed to take forever. Jake moved as quickly as he could without shaking the injured animal too much. He kept looking down at the small head poking out of his jacket. The amber eyes never looked away from his face. When he finally reached his cabin, Jake went straight inside and closed the door behind him. He laid the creature gently on his kitchen table and unwrapped his jacket. In the bright light from his windows, he could see how beautiful and unusual it really was. The scales on its body seemed to glow with their own inner light. The small wings were thin, like butterfly wings, but stronger. Its claws were sharp, but tiny. Everything about it seemed perfect and magical. Jake got his first aid kit and started cleaning the cut on the creature's side. It stayed perfectly still and let him work. The wound was not as deep as he had thought. With some antiseptic and a small bandage, it would heal quickly. The broken wing was more difficult. Jake used small splints made from wooden sticks and medical tape to hold the wing in the right position. The creature made soft sounds during this treatment, but did not try to pull away. When Jake finished treating its injuries, he made a comfortable bed from old towels in a wooden box. The creature curled up in the soft towels and closed its eyes. For the first time since finding it, Jake allowed himself to really think about what had happened. He had found something impossible, something that should not exist. And he had decided to keep it secret from everyone, including his own government. Jake Morrison, the forest ranger, had just made the most important decision of his life. 3 months had passed since Jake found the strange creature in the forest. He had named it Blaze because of the way its scales seemed to glow with inner fire. What started as a tiny injured animal the size of a house cat had grown into something much larger and more amazing. Blaze was now as big as a medium-sized dog. His wings had healed perfectly, and he could glide from Jake's kitchen table to the floor without making any sound. His scales had become more brilliant and changed colors depending on his mood. When he was happy, they glowed soft gold. When he was curious, they turned bright blue. When he was worried, they became deep green. The most incredible change was how smart Blaze had become. Jake realized from the beginning that this creature was intelligent, but now he understood that Blaze might be smarter than most humans. Within the first week, Blaze had learned to understand every word Jake spoke. By the second week, he was responding to complex instructions. Blaze could not speak with his mouth, but he had found other ways to communicate. He drew pictures in the dirt outside the cabin using his claws. Simple pictures at first showing food or water, or the need to go outside. But soon the pictures became more detailed and complex. Blaze drew maps of the forest, showing places he wanted to explore. He drew pictures of the sky and stars, as if he was trying to tell Jake something important about where he came from. Jake had changed his daily routine completely to take care of his secret friend. He started his forest patrols earlier in the morning so he could spend more time at the cabin during the day. He told his supervisor that he was working on a special wildlife research project that required detailed observation and documentation. The lie made Jake feel bad, but he knew he had no choice. If anyone discovered Blaze, the government would take him away for experiments. Jake had read enough books and seen enough movies to know what happened to unusual creatures that fell into the wrong hands. He would protect Blaze no matter what it cost him. During the long evenings, Jake would sit by the fireplace and watch Blaze practice flying around the cabin. The creature moved with incredible grace and seemed to enjoy showing off his growing skills. Sometimes Blaze would bring Jake small gifts from the forest, pretty stones or interesting pieces of wood or flowers that had unusual colors. But Jake was not the only person who spent time in these mountains. His childhood friend, Marcus Thompson, was also a forest ranger, and their patrol areas sometimes overlapped. Marcus had started asking questions about why Jake was spending so much time alone and why he seemed distracted during their radio conversations. Jake and Marcus had grown up together in the small town of Cedar Falls, 20 miles from the forest. They had gone to the same schools and played on the same baseball team in high school. Marcus knew Jake better than anyone else and could tell when something was bothering him. Last week, Marcus had shown up at Jake's cabin without calling first. Jake had barely managed to hide Blaze in the bedroom before answering the door. Marcus noticed that Jake seemed nervous and kept looking toward the back of the cabin. He also noticed scratches on the wooden floor that looked like claw marks. During his visits to town, Jake had started hearing strange stories from the local people. Old Pete, who ran the hardware store, said his hunting dogs were acting weird. They would bark at empty air and refuse to go into certain parts of the forest. Mary Chen, who owned the diner, said she had seen unusual lights in the sky above the mountains at night. Jake knew that Blaze was somehow causing these changes. The creature seemed to affect the behavior of wild animals and sometimes made the air around him feel electric. Jake worried that these signs would attract the attention of people who asked too many questions. One evening, as Jake was reading a book by the fireplace, he noticed that Blaze was staring at him with an intense expression. The creature's scales were glowing brighter than usual, and his amber eyes seemed to be looking directly into Jake's mind. Suddenly, Jake heard a voice inside his head. It was not his own voice, but something else entirely. The voice was gentle and warm, like the feeling of sunshine on his face. "Thank you for saving me, Jake Morrison. Thank you for keeping me safe." Jake dropped his book and stared at Blaze in amazement. The creature had not moved his mouth, but Jake was certain he had heard words as clearly as if someone was sitting next to him speaking out loud. "You can hear me now. Good. I have been trying to reach your mind for many days. Your species has strong mental barriers, but you have a kind heart, and that makes the connection possible." Jake tried to respond by thinking words back toward Blaze. "Can you really hear my thoughts?" he wondered. "Yes, I can hear you. My people communicate this way. We do not need to make sounds with our mouths like humans do. We share thoughts and feelings directly from mind to mind." Over the next few days, Jake learned more about Blaze through their mental conversations. The creature explained that his people were very old and had lived on Earth long before humans existed. They were not from another planet, but from another time when the world was very different. My kind went into deep sleep when the great disaster came from the sky millions of years ago. Most of us have been sleeping ever since, waiting for the world to become safe again. I woke up too early, and that is why I was injured when you found me. Jake asked what the great disaster was, but Blaze's mental voice became sad and confused when he tried to remember. "I was very young when it happened. The old ones know more, but they are still sleeping deep under the mountains and beneath the oceans." Blaze explained that his people had special knowledge about the world and the universe. They understood things about energy and matter and space that humans were still trying to learn. But this knowledge came with great responsibility and great danger. There are others who seek my people, others who want to use our knowledge for evil purposes. They have been searching for us across time and space. They will find me eventually, and when they do, both our peoples will be in terrible danger. Jake felt a chill run down his spine when he heard these words. He had thought that hiding Blaze from the human government was his biggest problem. Now he realized that there might be much worse things looking for his friend. That night, Jake lay awake thinking about everything Blaze had told him. His simple life as a forest ranger had become something far more complicated and dangerous. But when he looked at Blaze sleeping peacefully on his bed of soft towels, Jake knew he would do anything to protect this amazing creature who had become the most important thing in his world. Blaze had grown too big for Jake's cabin. The creature was now the size of a small horse, and his wings could stretch nearly 8 feet from tip to tip. When he stood up straight, his head almost touched the ceiling. Jake knew they needed a new plan, and they needed it quickly. The hardest part was that Blaze could no longer hide when people came to visit. Last month, Jake had built a secret room in his basement, but even that was getting too small. Blaze needed space to move around and exercise his growing body. Keeping him locked up all day was making both of them unhappy. Jake had found the perfect hiding place deep in the forest about 2 miles from his cabin. It was an old cave system that early miners had started to explore but never finished. The main cave was huge, with a high ceiling and several smaller rooms branching off from it. Fresh water ran through one corner, and the entrance was hidden behind thick bushes and fallen rocks. It had taken Jake 3 weeks to make the cave comfortable for Blaze. He brought in sleeping materials and stored food and water. He set up battery, powered lights, and even brought some of Blaze's favorite books. Yes, books. The dragon had learned to read human writing and loved stories about adventure and exploration. But moving to the cave created new problems. Blaze's telepathic abilities had grown much stronger as his body grew larger. Jake could now hear Blaze's mental voice from over a mile away. More worrying was that Blaze sometimes made accidental contact with other people's minds. 3 days ago, something had happened that frightened both of them. Jake was in town buying supplies when Blaze tried to reach his mind from the cave. But instead of connecting with Jake, Blaze had somehow touched the mind of someone else. Someone who was not in the town or even in the forest. Someone who was far away but had been thinking very hard about creatures like Blaze. The person was a woman scientist who worked for the government. Blaze had only made contact for a few seconds, but it was enough. The woman now knew that something unusual and intelligent existed in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest. She would come looking soon. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in her laboratory 300 miles away, staring at computer screens full of data. She had been studying strange energy readings from satellite images for 6 months. The readings showed unusual patterns of electromagnetic activity in remote areas all over the world. Most of her colleagues thought the readings were just equipment errors or natural phenomena, but Elena knew better. She had been studying these patterns day and night, and she was certain they were being created by something alive, something that did not belong to any known species on Earth. Yesterday, she had experienced something that changed everything. While analyzing data from the Cascade Mountains, she had felt a presence touch her mind. It lasted only a moment, but she was certain it was real. An intelligence had reached out to her across hundreds of miles. An intelligence that was ancient and powerful and completely alien. Elena had not told her supervisors about the mental contact yet. She wanted to gather more evidence first, but she had already requested permission to travel to the Pacific Northwest to investigate the energy readings in person. Her request had been approved, and she would arrive in the area within the week. Back in the forest, Jake was dealing with problems closer to home. Marcus had become increasingly suspicious about Jake's behavior. His old friend had started showing up at unexpected times and asking difficult questions about Jake's research project. 2 days ago, Marcus had arrived at Jake's cabin early in the morning when Jake was supposed to be out on patrol. Jake had been at the cave helping Blaze practice flying and had not heard his radio when Marcus called. When Jake finally returned to the cabin, he found Marcus waiting on the front porch with a concerned expression. "Something is going on with you, Jake, and I want to know what it is. We have been friends since we were kids, and I can tell when you are keeping secrets. You disappear for hours without checking in. You avoid spending time with other people. You look tired all the time, like you are not getting enough sleep." Jake had made up a story about studying the migration patterns of elk and how it required long hours of quiet observation. Marcus had not seemed convinced, but he had not pushed the issue further. At least, not yet. The local wildlife was also becoming a problem. Animals throughout the forest were acting strangely. Deer would gather in large groups and stare toward the area where Blaze's cave was hidden. Birds would fly in circles overhead for hours at a time. Even insects seemed to be drawn to the location. Jake knew that Blaze's growing presence was affecting the natural world around him. The dragon had explained that his people were connected to the life energy of the planet. As Blaze grew stronger, this connection became more powerful, and other living things could sense it. Yesterday, Jake had encountered a family of hikers who were lost and frightened. They said their compass was spinning wildly and their cell phones had stopped working. They claimed to have seen glowing lights moving through the trees at night. Jake had helped them find their way back to the main trail, but their stories would spread and bring more curious people to the area. The situation became even more complicated when Jake returned to the cave that evening. Blaze was agitated and his scales were flashing bright red, which usually meant he was worried or scared. "Jake, my friend, I have felt the minds of others like me. They are waking up from the long sleep. But I have also felt something else, something dark and hungry that hunts across the stars. The ancient enemy has found this world and they are coming." Jake felt his heart sink as he listened to Blaze's mental words. They had been so focused on hiding from human authorities that they had forgotten about the greater dangers Blaze had mentioned before. The creatures that sought Blaze's people for evil purposes were apparently real and they were getting closer. But there was also good news mixed with the bad. Other dragons were awakening around the world. Blaze would not be alone much longer. There was an ancient sanctuary in the mountains far to the north where his people had built a hidden city long ago. If they could reach it, Blaze would be safe, and Jake could finally stop worrying about government agents and curious scientists. The problem was getting there. The journey would take them through hundreds of miles of wilderness and populated areas. Blaze was now too large to travel during the day without being seen. They would need help, and they would need to be very careful about who they trusted. That night, Jake lay awake in his cabin planning their escape route. He would need to take vacation time from his job and gather supplies for a long journey. Most importantly, he would need to figure out how to travel with a dragon who was growing larger every day and whose presence affected everything around him. Jake looked out his window toward the forest where his friend waited in the hidden cave. Tomorrow, they would begin planning their journey to the dragon sanctuary. It would be dangerous and difficult, but Jake knew they had no other choice. The peaceful days of hiding in the forest were coming to an end. Dr. Elena Rodriguez arrived in Cedar Falls on a gray Tuesday morning, driving a white government van filled with scientific equipment. She checked into the small motel on Main Street and immediately began setting up her monitoring devices throughout the town and surrounding forest. Elena had brought 3 other people with her. Agent David Chen was a serious man in his 40s who worked for a secret government department that investigated unusual phenomena. Lisa Park was a computer specialist who could track electromagnetic signals and energy patterns. Robert Hayes was a field operative trained for dangerous situations. The team had official permission to conduct their investigation, but they told the local people they were studying weather patterns and wildlife migration. Elena did not want to cause panic by mentioning that they were looking for possible alien life forms. Jake learned about the government team from Marcus, who had stopped by his cabin that morning. Marcus was excited because he thought the scientists might be interested in Jake's elk research project. Jake smiled and nodded, but inside he felt sick with worry. That afternoon, Jake hiked to Blaze's cave to warn his friend about the new arrivals. The dragon had grown even larger over the past week and was now the size of a small airplane. His cave was barely big enough to contain him, and his energy field was becoming impossible to hide. Blaze was practicing creating small flames when Jake arrived. The dragon could now breathe fire in controlled bursts, though he was careful never to start forest fires. His scales had become more metallic and reflected light like mirrors. When he moved his head, the cave walls sparkled with dancing colors. "They are here, Jake. I can feel their minds searching for me. The woman scientist has a strong mental presence. She knows I exist, even though she has never seen me. We must leave this place tonight, or they will find us tomorrow." Jake had been preparing for this moment, but he still felt overwhelmed by everything they needed to do. He had gathered supplies and planned their route north toward Canada and the Dragon Sanctuary. But traveling with a creature the size of Blaze would be almost impossible without being discovered. "I have contacted others of my kind, Jake. 3 of my people have awakened in the mountains far to the north. They are calling to me and showing me the path to safety, but the journey will be dangerous for both of us." That evening, Jake went into town to gather final supplies and to say goodbye to his old life. He knew he might never return to Cedar Falls or work as a forest ranger again. Everything was changing, and there was no way to go back to the simple days when his biggest worry was helping lost hikers. At the hardware store, he overheard Agent Chen talking to the store owner about unusual animal behavior in the forest. Chen was asking about reports of glowing lights and strange sounds at night. The store owner mentioned that Jake Morrison knew more about the local wildlife than anyone else. Jake quickly paid for his supplies and left the store before Chen could notice him. But as he walked to his truck, he saw the agent watching him through the store window with curious eyes. Back at the cave, Jake found Blaze preparing for their journey. The dragon had been using his mental abilities to scout the area and plan their route. He had identified the safest paths through the wilderness and located places where they could hide during daylight hours. Elena Rodriguez was having the same kind of success with her scientific equipment. Her sensors had detected massive energy, readings coming from a location about 5 miles northeast of town. The readings were unlike anything in her experience, and they were getting stronger every hour. She had tried to reach the location that afternoon, but the forest was too thick and the terrain too rough for her equipment. Tomorrow she planned to hike in with a smaller portable scanner that could pinpoint the exact source of the energy. Agent Chen had spent the day interviewing local people and had learned interesting information about Jake Morrison. Several people mentioned that the young forest ranger had been acting strangely for months. He had become secretive and avoided social gatherings. He claimed to be working on a research project, but no one had seen any results. Chen decided that Jake Morrison would be his first official interview tomorrow morning. Something about the ranger's behavior suggested he might know more than he was telling about the unusual phenomena in the area. That night, Jake made his final preparations. He packed camping gear and enough food for a week. He wrote a letter to his supervisor explaining that he needed to take emergency leave for family reasons. He cleaned his cabin and made it look like he would be returning soon, even though he knew he probably never would. At midnight, Jake hiked through the dark forest to Blaze's cave for what he knew would be the last time. The dragon was waiting for him with glowing eyes that reflected the starlight filtering through the cave entrance. "My friend, it is time to begin our journey. The path will be long and dangerous, but my people are waiting for us in the ancient sanctuary. Together we will be safe from both your government and the dark enemies that hunt across the stars." Jake climbed onto Blaze's back and held tight to the dragon's neck as they emerged from the cave into the cool night air. Blaze's wings caught the wind and they rose silently above the treetops. Below them, the lights of Cedar Falls grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. Flying through the night sky on the back of a dragon was the most amazing experience of Jake's life. The world looked completely different from above. Mountains and valleys stretched out in all directions under the light of the moon and stars. Jake understood for the first time how small his human world really was, but their journey had only just begun. Behind them, Agent Chen's team was setting up equipment that would detect their flight path. Ahead of them lay hundreds of miles of dangerous territory where they could be spotted by aircraft or satellites. And somewhere in the darkness between, Earth and the stars' ancient enemies were drawing closer with each passing hour. As they flew north toward the dragon sanctuary, Jake held tight to his friend and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. They had escaped from the forest, but the real test of their friendship and courage was just beginning. Agent Chen discovered that Jake Morrison had disappeared when he arrived at the ranger's cabin early the next morning. The cabin was neat and clean, but there were signs that Jake had left in a hurry. His government radio was on the kitchen table, and his ranger uniform was hanging in the closet. More importantly, Chen's portable scanner was going crazy. The electromagnetic readings were off the charts and seemed to be moving away from the area toward the north. Whatever had been hiding in these mountains was now traveling fast across the wilderness. Chen immediately called for backup. Within 6 hours, military helicopters were flying search patterns over the Cascade Mountains. Satellite surveillance was redirected to track any unusual movement through the region. The full resources of the government's extraterrestrial investigation unit were now focused on finding Jake Morrison and whatever he was helping to hide. Dr. Elena Rodriguez felt guilty about causing such a massive response. She had only wanted to study an interesting scientific phenomenon. Now she found herself part of a military operation that seemed more interested in capturing than understanding whatever they were chasing. Jake and Blaze had spent their first day hiding in a deep canyon about 50 miles north of Cedar Falls. Blaze was exhausted from flying all night while carrying Jake's weight. The dragon needed rest, but they could both hear helicopters searching the area around them. Blaze had grown even larger during the night flight. The stress and excitement had triggered another growth spurt, and he was now almost too big for Jake to ride comfortably. His wingspan was nearly 30 feet, and his mental powers had become so strong that he could sense human minds from many miles away. Jake. I can feel the thoughts of the people hunting us. There are many of them, and they have powerful machines to help them search. We cannot hide from them for much longer. Tonight we must fly further and faster than we did before. Jake was worried about his friend. Blaze was pushing himself too hard, and Jake could see that the constant growth was taking a toll on the dragon's body. They needed to find a safe place where Blaze could rest properly, but every hour they delayed gave their pursuers more time to catch up. That evening, they received unexpected help. Marcus Thompson had driven north from Cedar Falls following rumors about helicopter activity in the mountains. He had been worried about Jake ever since his friend disappeared and had decided to search for him personally. Marcus was setting up his camping gear beside a mountain lake when Blaze and Jake landed nearby. Marcus had never seen anything like the magnificent dragon, and his first reaction was complete shock and terror. But Jake quickly explained the situation, and gradually Marcus began to understand the truth about his friend's secret. Marcus was amazed by Blaze's intelligence and gentle nature. The dragon made mental contact with him and shared some of his memories of the ancient world when dragons and humans had lived together in harmony. Within an hour, Marcus had agreed to help them reach the Dragon Sanctuary in Canada. The three of them traveled together for the next 2 days. Marcus drove his truck along mountain roads, while Jake and Blaze flew overhead, staying hidden in clouds and valleys. They made good progress, but the government search teams were getting closer every hour. On the 3rd day, they encountered Dr. Elena Rodriguez. She had separated from Agent Chen's group and was conducting her own search using a small, all-terrain vehicle. Elena had been following the electromagnetic trail left by Blaze's powerful energy field. When Elena saw Blaze for the first time, she stopped her vehicle and stared in complete amazement. The dragon was even more beautiful and majestic than she had imagined during their brief mental contact. His scales shimmered with inner light, and his amber eyes showed wisdom that seemed older than human civilization. Elena realized immediately that this creature was not a threat to humanity. Blaze radiated peace and intelligence and clearly cared deeply for his human companions. She made a decision that would end her government career, but might save an incredible life. Instead of reporting Blaze's location to Agent Chen, Elena offered to help the group reach safety. She had maps and equipment that could help them avoid the search teams. More importantly, she had access to government communication channels and could warn them when the search was getting too close. But their expanded group also faced new dangers. Director William Sharp had taken personal control of the search operation and was using increasingly aggressive tactics. Military jets were now patrolling the skies, and ground teams with heavy equipment were moving through the wilderness. Sharp had declared that the extraterrestrial entity represented a potential threat to national security and must be captured at any cost. He had authorization to cross the Canadian border if necessary and had requested cooperation from the Canadian military. The situation became desperate when Blaze detected something else in his mental searches. The ancient enemies he had warned Jake about were finally approaching Earth. Dark ships were moving through space toward the solar system, carrying creatures that fed on dragon life energy. My friend, the Void Seekers have found this world. They are still many days away, but they are coming. My people must unite quickly, or we will all be destroyed. The human governments do not understand the real danger they face. Jake realized that their journey to the dragon sanctuary had become about more than just finding safety for Blaze. They were racing to prevent a disaster that could destroy both human and dragon civilizations. That night, the group was almost captured when military teams surrounded their hiding place in an abandoned mining camp. Only Blaze's ability to sense human minds at a distance allowed them to escape in time. But the close call made it clear that they were running out of options. Elena used her government radio to listen to Director Sharp's communications. She learned that he was planning a massive operation for the following day that would seal off the entire border region. Hundreds of soldiers and dozens of aircraft would make escape impossible. The group had less than 24 hours to reach the Canadian border and find the hidden entrance to the Dragon Sanctuary. Marcus pushed his truck to its limits on dangerous mountain roads, while Blaze flew ahead to scout for safe passages. As they raced through the night, Jake could not stop thinking about how much his life had changed. 6 months ago, he had been a simple forest ranger whose biggest worry was helping lost hikers. Now he was fleeing from his own government while trying to save a dragon who might be the key to preventing an alien invasion. But when he looked at Blaze flying majestically through the starlit sky, Jake knew he had made the right choices. Some friendships were worth any sacrifice, and some secrets were worth keeping no matter what the cost. The Dragon Sanctuary was somewhere ahead of them in the Canadian wilderness. If they could reach it, Blaze would be safe, and the awakening dragons could prepare to defend both their peoples from the approaching darkness. The chase was almost over, but the real battle was just beginning. The final confrontation happened at dawn on the Canadian border. Director Sharp's forces had set up roadblocks on every mountain pass and stationed helicopters at key points along the international boundary. There was no way through the military cordon without being detected. Jake, Marcus, Elena, and Blaze gathered in a hidden valley just 5 miles south of the border to plan their next move. Blaze had grown to his full adult size during the night and was now a magnificent dragon over 40 feet long with wings that could blot out the sun. His presence filled the entire valley with golden light. Agent Chen had broken away from Sharp's operation and found their location using Elena's radio signals. But instead of calling for backup, he approached them alone with his hands raised in a gesture of peace. I have been watching this situation develop, and I believe Director Sharp is making a terrible mistake. That creature is clearly intelligent and peaceful. The way it protects you and communicates with you proves it means no harm to humanity. Chen explained that he had joined the government's extraterrestrial unit because he wanted to make peaceful contact with alien life. But Sharp was only interested in capturing and studying any non-human intelligence they discovered. Chen could not be part of an operation that would harm such a magnificent being. The group now included 4 humans and 1 dragon, but they still faced impossible odds. Sharp's forces surrounded them on 3 sides, and the Canadian border was heavily monitored. Blaze could fly over the military cordon, but he refused to abandon his human friends. As they discussed their options, Blaze suddenly raised his great head and stared toward the sky with alarm. His mental voice reached all of them at once, filled with urgency and fear. They are here. The Void Seekers have arrived in your solar system. I can feel their dark presence approaching Earth. We have run out of time. High above the atmosphere, sleek black ships materialized out of empty space. The alien vessels were unlike anything in human experience. They seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and they moved with impossible speed and grace. The lead ships entered Earth's atmosphere over major cities around the world. As they descended toward the surface, all electronic equipment in the area began to malfunction. Power grids failed, streetlights went dark, and communication systems shut down. Director Sharp received emergency reports from his headquarters about the alien arrival. The ships were clearly hostile and were draining energy from everything they approached. Conventional weapons had no effect on them, and fighter jets that got too close simply fell from the sky as their engines died. Sharp realized that his operation against the Dragon was now meaningless. Earth was facing an invasion by creatures. That made his quarry look like a harmless pet. He needed every resource available to defend against this new threat. Blaze spread his wings and rose into the air above the valley. His scales blazed with inner fire, and his mental voice reached every human mind within miles. People of Earth, my name is Blaze, and I am the last free member of an ancient race that once shared this world with your ancestors. The creatures attacking. Your cities are called Void Seekers. They feed on life energy and will drain your planet dry if they are not stopped. The Dragon's telepathic message continued reaching military commanders, government leaders, and ordinary citizens around the world. For the first time in human history, an alien intelligence was speaking directly to the entire human race. My people have knowledge that can help you fight these invaders. We know their weaknesses and how to build weapons that can destroy them. But we need your cooperation and trust. The age of hiding is over. Dragons and humans must stand together, or both our peoples will perish. Sharp stared up at the magnificent dragon hovering above his forces and finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. This creature was not an enemy to be captured, but an ally offering to save humanity from destruction. The director ordered his troops to stand down and opened communication channels with Blaze. Within minutes, he was coordinating with the dragon to establish a defense against the Void Seeker invasion. Blaze shared his ancient knowledge about the aliens and their technology. The Void Seekers were vulnerable to certain electromagnetic frequencies and could be defeated by weapons that used crystalline energy sources. Dragons had fought these creatures before across many worlds and knew how to win. Other dragons began, emerging from their hidden sanctuaries around the world. They had been awakened by the crisis and were ready to join the fight. Ancient beings who had slept for millions of years rose from deep caves and ocean trenches to defend their adopted home. Jake found himself serving as a liaison between human military forces and the Dragon Alliance. His months of friendship with Blaze had taught him how to communicate with the ancient race and understand their way of thinking. Marcus and Elena worked with government scientists to build new weapons based on dragon technology. The combined knowledge of both species created defenses that neither could have developed alone. Agent Chen coordinated intelligence-gathering efforts that helped track Void Seeker movements and predict their attacks. His decision to trust Blaze instead of following Sharp's orders had been the first step toward the Human-Dragon Alliance. The war against the Void Seekers lasted 3 months. There were victories and defeats on both sides, but gradually, the combined forces of humans and dragons began to gain the upper hand. The aliens had expected to find a divided world with primitive defenses. Instead, they faced a united planet with weapons they could not understand or counter. The final battle took place in orbit above Earth as dragon riders mounted on their giant companions fought alongside human spacecraft to destroy the last Void Seeker mothership. Jake rode on Blaze's back through the vacuum of space, protected by the dragon's energy field, as they helped deliver the killing blow to the alien fleet. When the war ended, Earth was changed forever. Dragons lived openly among humans, serving as teachers, advisors, and protectors. The ancient knowledge they shared led to incredible advances in technology, medicine, and space exploration. Jake continued working as a forest ranger, but now his job included protecting dragon nesting sites and helping young dragons learn about the modern world. His simple life had become extraordinary, but he was happier than he had ever been. Blaze built a new home in the mountains near Jake's cabin. The dragon spent his days teaching human scientists about energy manipulation and space travel. In the evenings, he would visit Jake, and they would sit together watching the sunset and talking about their adventures. The friendship between a forest ranger and a dragon had saved both their peoples and opened a new chapter in the history of Earth. Humanity had learned that the universe was full of both dangers and allies. The key to survival was having the courage to extend friendship to those who were different and the wisdom to accept help when it was offered. Looking up at the stars, Jake often wondered what other intelligences might be waiting among the distant worlds. But he was no longer afraid of the unknown. Whatever came next, humans and dragons would face it together as partners in the greatest adventure of all.